Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the session on micromobility and active transport. My name is Alexandre Santacreu. I am a policy analyst at the International Transport Forum, and I am honored to be moderating the session. This is part of the ITF Pre-Summit Research Day, in which we connect the work of researchers with the ITF program of policy analysis and also with the policy discussions held during the summit. We will hear today from three speakers. They will have 15 minutes each, and there will be a round of questions after each presentation. It is up to you which questions will be discussed. For your questions to reach the speakers, please use the live Q&A box. In this box, you may see a like button that looks like that, a thumb up. The button appears next to each question raised by participants, and you can use that button to give priority to what you think are the most relevant questions. Further down is the discussion box, which is best suited for opinions, comments, greetings, and the sharing of reports, hyperlinks, etc. Now back to our topic. The last 12 months have put active travel and micromobility under the spotlights. The pandemic has encouraged people to walk and cycle more. Researchers provided evidence that obesity and local air pollution make COVID-19 symptoms worse. Local governments have accelerated the redistribution of road space in favor of people walking and cycling. They converted on-street car parking spaces into outdoor dining spots. And now bike stores run out of bikes. So could this be the moment when the transition towards active travel and micromobility finally accelerates? Our three speakers all contribute to this transition. They are here today to promote change. They will present innovative tools, methods, and regulations towards more and better active travel. So we are privileged to see them share this with us. So let me turn to our first presenter, who is Fernando Cordero. Fernando Cordero is a PhD student in transportation engineering at Auburn University, Alabama, USA. His research interest includes travel behavior modeling, big data, sustainability, resilience in transportation. Fernando studied and worked in Nicaragua before joining Auburn. He was a recipient of the Fulbright Foreign Scholarship in 2017. So today, Fernando will present an innovative tool that helps communities plan their walking and cycling routes so that those routes meet the strongest possible demand. Infrastructure is indeed the best possible investment to make, to make people walk and cycle more, and to make more people walk and cycle more. Recent ITF reports on cycling safety and micromobility safety have both concluded on the need for a connected and protected network of bike lanes. Fernando has 15 minutes, and I invite you all once again to hit the live Q&A function so I can present your questions to the speaker at the end. Fernando, the floor is yours, and I invite you to share your screen.
Thank you so much, Alexandre. All right. Thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity to present and share my experience working in an active transportation tool. My name is Fernando. I'm a PhD student at Auburn University. The title of this presentation is Development and Implementation of an Active Walking and Cycling Route Visualization Tool to support community health and mobility. First, I want to introduce the research team that make this project possible. Dr. Jeffrey Lamondia and myself were both from the Civil and Environmental Engineering Department at Auburn University. Ruth Brooke and Mitch Carter from the Extension Office at Auburn University. Barb Trumpler, she's the Associate Dean for Cooperative Extension at Auburn University, and the coalition team members. I'm gonna talk a little bit more about what these coalition teams are. This project is being implemented in the state of Alabama in the United States. Alabama is located in the southeast of the US, and you can see some of the statistics about the state. Mainly, I want to focus on poverty rate. The state has a poverty rate of 17.5%. This is around 7% higher than the US poverty rate. The median household income is around $20,000 lower than the US median household income. And for the record, this data is from 2019, so it doesn't include the effect of COVID-19 in socioeconomic conditions of the state. At the same time, Alabama it has the prevalence of adult obesity of 36.1%. That means that 36.1% of the adult population is considered obese. This makes Alabama one of 6 states in the US with obesity prevalence higher than 35%. According to the Alabama Department of Health, this is mainly because of poor nutrition and lack of physical activity. Within the state of Alabama, this project focused on 13 counties, but during the first year, we only worked with 6, the first 6 counties that you can see highlighted in light blue in the map. And at the bottom, you also can read some of the socioeconomic statistics of these counties. Basically, poverty rate much higher than the state average, and household median income much lower than the median household income of the state. Finally, just want to know that 4 of these counties are within a region that is known as the Black Belt. This is one of the poorest and less developed areas in the state of Alabama and in the US. So we know there's a few issues in the state of Alabama, particularly in a public health issue and equality. So the research team decided to implement an active transportation approach. Why? Because there's extensive research that has documented the benefits, from health benefits to improve road safety, economic benefits, social equity, particularly social equity, because in this region in Alabama, there's very poor access to public transportation. And we have some population groups, especially aging population, poor population, that they don't have access to motor vehicles. So these people doesn't have the same opportunities to access healthcare facilities, to access school, to access fresh food markets. So we wanted to focus particularly in these groups. And of course, we know that active transportation has a health benefit included. At the same time, we observe that these small and medium communities, they lack the knowledge to understand where walking and cycling improvement are more beneficial. Also, they don't have the human resources or the tools to measure active transportation, and they don't have opportunities to include this type of planning in their own local transportation planning. So we came out with the active road visualization tool. And the objectives of the ARB tool, as we call it, was to provide the knowledge to understand where walking and cycling improvement are more beneficial. Provide a tool, the ARB is a tool by itself, to provide this tool to measure active transportation. And of course, to provide the opportunities to include active transportation planning in the local transportation planning process. The ARB tool by itself is not gonna solve the issues in this region in Alabama. So we came out with coalition partners, community coalition partners, or as I mentioned before, the coalition teams. And what is the coalition teams? These are members of the community from the political spectrum to health professional community. We have faith, church pastors, we have youth leaders, we have members from the local businesses, and they have a common interest in promoting active transportation because they have a small idea of the benefits, but we teach them, we show them, we educate them on the different benefits, and of course they were on board. On the other side, we have the agency partner. As I mentioned, the Alabama Cooperative Extension. This is the contact between all the community coalitions and the agency partners. The Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering, because we developed the tool, and the main sponsor of this project, which is the Center for Disease Control with the Division of Nutrition, Physical Activity, and Obesity, and the High Obesity Program. And across the coalition teams, we have a diversity in gender, race, and backgrounds, so equitable representation across the board. So what is the ARB tool? The ARB tool requires a few inputs. As you can see in the slides, we identify where are the people, where do they live. Our main source is the US Census website, very available and public data. And then where do these people go? This is what we call everyday destinations, and we're talking about school, public office, parks, grocery shopping. And the main source of this information is the coalitions. They know better than us where their community most frequently go. The method of the tool is based on a modification of the 3-4-step planning model. We have a trip production that is based on trip grades that we calculate from the 2017 National Household Travel Survey. The trip attraction is based on a weight score that comes from the score of each of the destinations and the number of available destinations in the zone. Trip distribution, we use the traditional gravity model. Mode choice, of course, we are only talking about walking and cycling. And the road assignment, we develop this through the ArcGIS interface. And I'll show you how does the tool looks. So the ARB tool is a customized tool that we develop in the ArcGIS interface. As you can see right here, this is very easy to install, easy to use. It requires minimum inputs. We developed the tool in a Python language, and this is how the input window looks. Users will be required to input some of the data requirements, and then you just execute and run the tool. The output is going to look like this. It's going to be basically a map of the community that is going to highlight the roads that have more potential to support active transportation. But this map by itself is not the end product. We come back to the community, to the coalitions, we sit and we present this map and we discuss the map with the community. And this is one of the most valuable experience from this research. Because of the feedback we get from the community, this is very valuable and important. As you can see, again, in this map, we highlight in red what are the roads that have the most potential. What we observed from implementing the tool in 6 counties. First, that the communities became educated on active routes. They understand the benefits, they understand how to implement it, they understand the challenges, so they just became educated. of course, as I mentioned, their insight and their feedback is very valuable. They gave us so much information that we were able to make modification and use, for example, alternative or parallel street, because they know better than us the conditions on site. They have safety concerns that we cannot see. So their feedback in general is very valuable. Finally, these coalitions, they become what we call ambassadors of active transportation. They will get their neighbors on board. They are gonna talk when they have meetings with their friends. They are gonna talk about these projects, and they will get other people interested. And of course, they will lobby to get this type of policies implemented in their communities. The bottom line, the ARB tool and the work with the coalitions begins a data-driven discussion that identifies potential roads where active transportation infrastructure can be implemented. Some of the key takeaways from this project: having coalitions, community coalition is critical, because we can have different feedbacks, different perspectives from different groups of the community. All of them, they have different necessities, different needs. So it's crucial, it's critical to have these coalitions, to create this type of coalitions. And of course, understanding what they want, what their needs, is the first step before we start working in planning for active transportation. The ARB tool is a very flexible, custom tool, and I think this is a very important key takeaway. We can work from very basic custom tools, practical tools, and we can provide this type of community solutions to their different challenges to implement active transportation. It's important to have data-driven discussion. As I said, having these maps, these preliminary maps, begins a discussion through a number of meetings with the coalitions. We have feedback, we discuss, and we try to identify which are the best roads to implement active transportation. And the fact that we have a map, it can also give us a perspective of connectivity between neighborhoods, between different destinations, and we can plan for future corridors. Maybe we are not going to be able to build a whole bike lane or trail, but we can start working in connectivity and corridors. Finally, just working with community and local coalitions and combining that with the engineering knowledge, that was very valuable, a very unique experience. And I think this, as a result of this partnership between the engineering results and the local insights, this just gave us best planning result in general. With that, I'll be open to questions.
Fernando, thank you very much for this presentation. I thoroughly appreciate it. We already have one or two questions. Let me start by this one. It's from Ronald Bueno. Ronald is asking what was the role of the health community at the start of this initiative? Were they one of the drivers, or were they simply a partner like the others?
Well, actually, the health concern was one of the main reasons we implement this project. So we have health partners, of course, but just I'll say that everyone across the different coalition members, and I'm talking about business, I'm talking about education, they were all aware of the health benefits. So even if they were not health experts, they had health concerns, and they were really interested in promoting health benefits from active transportation. So I would say, in general, improving the health conditions of the community was one of the main drivers of this project.
Thank you. I don't know if people can see you because you're still sharing your slide. Maybe would you mind taking it down
Yes.
so people see you better? Thank you. So I have another question about the barriers and obstacles to active transportation. What are the barriers you faced in this piece of work? Was there opposition from people who didn't like it? And were there examples where your coalition really helped? Can you give us examples?
Of course. One of the experience that I remember is that, of course, we invite many members of the community. Not all of them decide to attend the webinars and the conference, but those who decide to attend, they told us their experience trying to convince others. And mainly one of the challenges was the perception. People think that active transportation will be too expensive. In Alabama, particularly, people really love driving and love their vehicles. So some people just don't feel comfortable sharing the road with cyclists or having people walking on the sidewalks. So a lot of perception from the public, they are not very comfortable with this type of improvements. So probably the biggest challenge is, besides the ones I mentioned in the presentation, is just the public perception. People is still not very well educated about the benefits of active transportation. So I think once we are able to overcome the public's perception, we will be able to fully implement this type of improvement.
What was the biggest surprise you got from your community partners?
Well, the first time we present, the first county we work and we showed them the maps, we were really surprised how accurate the tool was. We were going through the maps, and we could see their reaction. They were like, "Yeah, that's the road we need. That's the sidewalk we need." So it was really surprising for us to see the percentage of accuracy of the tool. And another thing that was really interesting for me is their feedback, very valuable feedback to make modifications. I remember a few of the communities, they asked us to use a parallel street because the tool has identified, it was, for example, a high-speed road, vehicles going 60 miles per hour, so very fast, and a lot of vehicles speeding. So they were not comfortable with considering that road. So I think that was very surprising. The fact that they were really they were quick to understand how active transportation worked because they had the safety concerns as well.
Right. In your presentation, you talk about everyday destinations, and your tool requires the mapping of those destinations and the estimation of how many trips they get. So do you believe that the crowdsourcing of GPS data from smartphones could help you just that and scale up? Or do you believe that this would cut the connection with the coalition and this would actually harm the project?
Yeah, I think that using GPS will be very valuable for this type of project, but just for the conditions and just, you know, the particular situation of these communities, I will prefer not to use that type of data because, you know, the more we got them involved, I think this works better. So yeah, I would say that probably using that type of data will just probably make them feel not very involved in the project.
Thank you. We've got a couple of questions on the modeling itself. I'll start with this one, a quick one from Emantini, sorry if I don't pronounce it correctly. Does your data include walking and cycling as access or egress?
Just as I'll say just as access to these destinations. Yes.
Access to public transport as well, if there is any?
Oh no, not. We don't consider public transportation. Just walking or cycling from residential areas to the everyday destinations.
Would a transport hub or a train station qualify?
Sorry?
Would a transport hub or a train station qualify as an everyday destination?
We could consider it, but we didn't have any in these communities. We just don't have public transportation in these communities. But I will include it if it exists that type of transfers to public transportation. It will definitely be included as an everyday destination.
Right. There is another question from Marie-Laure, thanking you for the presentation and asking you to talk in more details about the gravity model. So I will ask you to be short and provide more details to Marie-Laure in the chat later on. But would you be able to tell us more in 1 minute about the gravity model?
Yeah, it's just the basic gravity model, and what the only specifics of this model is that we use I don't remember right now the source, but we use an NCHRP report on active transportation, and this report has developed the factors for the gravity model. So that was the only variation, that we use this source, this NCHRP report. I don't remember right now the number, and we use those factors in the equation of the gravity model.
Thank you. I find it truly remarkable that you're taking modeling from what is often seen as a big black box, people have little trust in it, to something that is community driven and simplified to that extent. So really congrats for that. I would like to stop the questions here because we've got 2 other speakers coming up. Thank you, Fernando.
Thank you.
Next, I believe Todd Litman is on the line. So I'll introduce Todd. Todd Litman joins us from Canada. He's the founder of an independent research organization called the Victoria Transport Policy Institute. Todd is the author of the online encyclopedia for transportation demand management. He often writes on cost-benefits analysis. His reputation is to make technical concepts accessible to a larger audience, and I personally recommend you to read his newsletter. Today, Todd will tell us why the reliance on travel time savings in the transportation planning profession is taking us towards inequitable and costly transport systems with negative impacts on public health, on traffic safety, and on the environment. This is a very challenging topic on which the ITF published a roundtable report just 2 years ago. In that report, our first recommendation was to review and update periodically the pieces of guidance that set the value of travel time savings. So I believe Todd is going to help us do that, and probably much more than that. Todd, you have 15 minutes. During that time, I will be keeping an eye on the live Q&A function so I can raise those questions to you at the end. Todd, the floor is yours. Please share your screen. Todd, you're muted, I think.
Right. Thank you, or merci. Thank you all for participating in this session. And I'm gonna present my slideshow. So I'm calling it time versus money. Although, of course, it's much more than that. It's not just money, it's also health and environmental quality. But much of the discussion, much of the technical analysis really is about time, how we value travel time versus money. So let's proceed. Transportation planning involves countless trade-offs between speed and other goals. Individuals often make choices between faster and more expensive modes like automobile and airplane over slower but more affordable modes like walking and bicycling and public transport. And also individuals have to decide, am I going to work harder, work longer hours for a more expensive mode, or work fewer hours and spend more time traveling using a slower mode? Similarly, transportation planning decisions often involve trade-offs between faster investments in faster modes or redesigning streets to prioritize speed, even if that creates a disamenity to walking and bicycling, what's called the barrier effect. There's also speed versus safety. And in the bigger picture, there's the trade-off between increased mobility, that is how fast and how far you can travel, versus local accessibility. So many of the things that we do to increase mobility, such as expanding roads and providing generous parking, they create a more sprawled land use pattern that's less accessible. So it's these trade-offs that I want to highlight in my presentation. Now, for the last century, most of our transportation planning has assumed that the top priority was speed. So we evaluate transportation system performance based on traffic speeds and roadway level of service and traffic congestion delay. These are all indicators of mobility and speed. And we have very poor tools for evaluating affordability, that is saving money rather than time. Even though when we do surveys, there's a survey that was done a few years ago by the US Federal Highway Administration. It asked transportation system users what their biggest priorities were, their biggest problems or their biggest concerns, and it turned out the price of travel was the most important. So from the transportation system user's perspective, affordability is very important. It's actually more important than speed, but our transportation planning doesn't reflect that. We have very few tools for valuing saving money over saving time. And in fact, for the last century, most of our planning has favored mobility over accessibility and faster modes over slower modes. You could call it the cycle of automobile dependency or the cycle of sprawl. There are many specific planning practices that do this. An example is that most jurisdictions devote 10 times as much money to accommodating car travel as they do to accommodating active travel. So if you want to spend €1 million to improve bike facilities, you often face a much higher burden of proof than if you were to spend €1 million improving automobile transportation. Let's look at the history. From a historical perspective, during the last, say, half millennium, that is the last 500 years or so, we've seen a steady increase in the speed, the potential speed of travel. So I don't want to understate the value of speed. Let's look what's happened over the last century. One of my studies looks at the economic effects of the transportation innovations during the last 120 years. And what it shows, this graph shows from 1900, when most travel was by walking, up to the current time, there was this huge increase in average mobility, the number of kilometers or miles traveled per person per year, increased by at least an order of magnitude, at least 10 times. A huge accomplishment that has transformed our lives and our communities. In many of the ways good. I mean, we've expanded our worlds, but there are also very large costs. And that's what tends to be overlooked. We experience the benefits of increased mobility very directly, immediately, but the costs are often buried things like the higher taxes to pay for roads and higher development costs to pay for parking facilities included in buildings, and this huge increase in the cost to households from owning and operating cars. Automobile travel costs a lot more than walking and bicycling and public transit per kilometer, per mile or kilometer of travel. And because people who own a car travel 5 to 10 times more per year than people who rely on walking and bicycling and public transit, the total costs, the costs per year are huge. So somebody that relies primarily on walking and bicycling and public transit, their costs are probably less than €1,000 a year. Where if you own and operate if you own a car and drive most destinations, you're probably spending about 5 times that much, about $5,000 or euros per year just for local transportation. So automobile transportation has greatly increased, or our increase in mobility has greatly increased the cost that people pay. And here's what I want to emphasize now. These costs are regressive. They are particularly unfair to people who cannot or should not or prefer not to drive. And particularly, they are unfair to low-income people. And one way to measure this is to evaluate travel speeds based on effective speed. So nominal speed is distance divided by the time you spend traveling, but effective speed is distance divided by the time you spend traveling and the time you spend earning money to pay for your travel expenses. And when you measure it this way, for low-income people, and in this case, in this graph, I'm displaying that as somebody who earns $12 an hour. A low-income person is spending more time earning money for their car. No, I should say a low-income motorist. So a low-income person that owns and operates a car spends more time earning money to own that car and drive that car than they spend in that car, driving that car. A higher income person, of course, the ratio is much lower. So for a higher income person, owning and driving a car is the effective speed is rather good. But for somebody who earns a low wage, it's often faster to use bicycling and public transit than it is to drive, taking into account the financial costs and the time they spend driving, earning money to drive, in addition to the time they spend traveling. Here's another way to look at it. I look at various scenarios, different incomes, different annual miles, different vehicle costs. And for a typical low-income motorist, the difference between the nominal speed and the effective speed is huge. For a higher income person, it's and somebody who's driving maximum annual miles, so they're getting a lot of value, a lot of miles from their vehicle per year. The difference is not so great. But for low-income people who are driving low annual miles, there's a huge difference between the effective speed and the nominal speed. Let me illustrate what our planning practices that focus on speed do at the community level. So during the last century, many high accessibility neighborhoods, that is a neighborhood where you don't need to own a car, where almost everything you need can be reached easily by walking and bicycling and public transit. Those high accessibility urban neighborhoods were often destroyed to build freeways to make it easier for suburban motorists to get to downtown jobs. And so this type of planning benefited wealthier motorists and wealthier suburban motorists, but harmed poorer people by spoiling their neighborhoods and reducing the accessible and affordable mobility options. So you can't, if you wanted to live a car-free lifestyle by living in a neighborhood where everything you need is easily accessible by walking and bicycling, you have far fewer opportunities to buy a home in that neighborhood, and it's probably spoiled by the air and noise pollution and the barrier effect of the vehicles. And so this is one of countless examples of how transportation engineers' emphasis on speed and overlooking other impacts, affordability and neighborhood quality and accessibility and health and environmental objectives, has biased our planning. So one way to think of it is multimodalism ensures that everybody gets their fair share. If we give equal attention to affordability, we will invest as much, at least as much, in the affordable modes as we invest in the fast modes. So somebody that drives everywhere says, I want my infrastructure dollars spent on roads and parking facilities, but somebody that wants to save money says, I want my infrastructure dollars spent on better public transit services and improved walking and bicycling conditions. So here are my recommendations, very briefly. Use effective rather than nominal speeds and generalized costs in transportation planning. Recognize affordability as a planning goal and give as much priority to affordability as to speed. Recognize the unfairness and regressivity, that is, it hurts poor people, of policies that favor speed over affordability and automobile travel over more affordable and inclusive modes. And evaluate transportation based on accessibility rather than mobility. For example, recognize that more compact and multimodal locations provide more access than with less mobility. So you would say that those high accessibility neighborhoods are more efficient at delivering access. You need less mobility, less travel, and therefore lower transportation costs than if you live in an automobile-dependent, sprawled area. So if anybody's interested in finding out more about the research that went into this presentation, visit our website, Victoria Transport Policy Institute, vtpi.org, where you'll find reports on all of these subjects. So that is my presentation, and I'm happy to discuss any questions or comments.
Thank you, Todd. Yeah, very, very fascinating material. Thank you for sharing that. The questions will arrive in a second. I start with one of my questions. So what if a transport investment makes a country, say, richer but more inequitable? Is there any hope that a cost-benefit analysis will flag it, will stop it? Can we monetize the fairness and equality dimension in a transport investment, or is that all a hoax? Is there no way we can put a single figure on a project, and should we instead all work hard on distributional analysis?
Right, that's a great question, and my quick answer is that yes, it is perfectly possible to, for one thing, the starting point is changing our goals to recognize things like affordability and inclusivity and resource efficiency as equally important as speed and mobility. That's one way to do it. That's one component of the reforms. Another is to give greater weight to the benefits that go to disadvantaged populations. So you would say that let's say a 10% increase in speed for a wealthy person provides far less marginal benefit than a 10% increase in speed for somebody who's mobility constrained, who's poor, has a physical disability, for whom a marginal increase in mobility is going to provide far greater benefits. So it's recognizing what economists call diminishing marginal benefits, and that it's perfectly possible to incorporate that into the planning, into the benefit cost analysis. A lot of it is just common sense, and I didn't mention it in my presentation, but I do have a report called Evaluating Transportation Equity. And that does provide some guidelines or some ways of thinking about how we can do a much better job of incorporating social equity goals. Another component of that, very straightforward, is to recognize that many physically and economically and socially disadvantaged people do rely on non-automotive transportation. So we can identify the forms of transportation that are most beneficial to the disadvantaged populations and make sure that we favor what you could call the affordable and inclusive modes, that we would never make a planning decision that makes poor people and people with disabilities worse off.
Thank you. I see a few questions have come up. One from Lisa Marie Glover. She's asking, in the reframing of transportation to look at social equity, affordability, and livability, what do you feel is the number one thing decision makers can do at the policy level? Number one.
Right. Well, my first priority would be just to make sure that we reverse our priorities. We develop the new, sometimes people call it a sustainable transportation hierarchy, which puts the resource efficient modes, walking, bicycling, and public transit, at a higher priority than automobile travel. And in the past, we said we did that primarily for environmental goals, but it's equally important for social goals. And actually, I think I should mention that there's pretty good research showing that a city that is more accessible and requires less mobility is actually more economically productive than a city that's more sprawled and requires more mobility. So it's social benefits, economic benefits, and environmental benefits all come from reversing our priority and saying we certainly don't want to ignore speed as a goal, but it's much lower priority than things like affordability, inclusivity, resource efficiency, and overall accessibility. So it just changes the priorities to make sure that the affordable, resource efficient modes are the ones that we improve most.
Thank you. In your presentation, you make the case for assessing a project not on its travel time savings, but on the accessibility gains it provides to populations, such as number of jobs or schools you can reach in a given amount of time, or time budget, or effective speed. I'd like to ask you if you've got precise recommendations on that, if you know if some administrations have already embraced such accessibility computations.
Well, as you know, the ITF has actually published quite a few reports on what I think you could call the transition from mobility-based planning to the much more sophisticated accessibility-based planning. So there are many factors in accessibility. One is speed, let's say automobile speed. The other is the speed of the other modes of transportation. But another factor is the connectivity of the transportation system. So the ease of getting, say, to bicycle or walk to your bus stop or your bus station. That's a connectivity factor. And then there's also land use accessibility. So the distances that you have to travel to get to places. And there's some non-mobile accessibility can also involve telecommunications and delivery services and affordability. So those are all components of accessibility. So accessibility-based planning doesn't ignore mobility. It doesn't ignore speed. It just recognizes it's one of half a dozen factors that should be considered. So, and as you know, just in the last few years, in the last decade, using modern GIS mapping systems, we can do a far, far better job of truly mapping accessibility. So we can take into account the time and money that it takes for somebody to get to destinations by walking and bicycling and public transit and automobile, and compare them and identify how different land use patterns affect this accessibility. That's what we need. There are great breakthroughs in this So part of it is just for individual communities, agencies, or planners to track the progress that we're making in our ability to measure accessibility and apply that when we're doing transportation planning. What do you think? Is that consistent with what the ITF has discovered?
Yes, it is, and thank you for referring to that work. We did a lot of research indeed on accessibility and connectivity. A lot of it was funded with the European Commission, and I will paste a link in the discussion forum towards that piece of research, unless my colleagues do it first. So thank you. We have time for one extra question, so that could be from Vishal Mahajan. What can be done to make biking an alternative for long trips, say over 5 kilometers, and also acceptable to more people?
Right. So that's a great question, because when you do full cost analysis, so you're looking at all the costs to the user and for the roads and parking facilities and environmental impacts and others, you can't beat bicycling. Bicycling for most what you could call urban trips, so distances, moderate distances, under say 5 kilometers, you simply can't beat bicycling. It's the most cost-effective, and it's a very inclusive form of transportation. So, you know, almost any city benefits by making sure that everybody can bicycle as much as they want. That any trip, anytime somebody could bicycle, they have the opportunity and the incentives to use bicycles for those trips. Okay, and there's some very good news. One is that we do have some examples of cities that have well-developed bicycle networks and these incentives, and you get these very high bicycle mode shares. You can easily get 20%, and some cities are close to 50% of local trips are made by bicycling. And with the new e-bikes, the bicycles with a little motor that assists the traveler, you can just about double the number of trips that could be made by bicycling. So a trip that, say, a parent with 2 children, that in the past that was a little bit too much to take on a bicycle, even with a bike trailer, even a fairly healthy, you know, strong bicyclist. Now they get the assist bike, the electric assist bike, and they can easily carry 2 children and the shopping, all the groceries. Okay, so the e-bikes double the potential for bicycling. And we know that it is possible that a lot of people, even in rainy and slightly hilly places, you can have a lot of bicycling. Okay, that's the good news. The bad news is speed. The transportation planning that prioritizes speed creates streets that are harsh, that are unpleasant for bicyclists. Now, some bicyclists, some of us are proud of our ability to bicycle in busy traffic, but if you want to get the vast majority of people to really take advantage of bicycling, then we need protected bikeways and true, you know, safe streets for bicycling. Complete streets is one of the terms we use. Now, for the distance, I think the best solution for bicycling for longer distances, it isn't to expect bicyclists to go longer distance. I think it's integration with public transportation. If for trips over, say, 5 kilometers, it really, you know, I'm your ultimate bicycle. I bicycle every, you know, a lot, and we don't own a car, and I bicycle a lot. But there's distances I won't, you know, that are just a little bit too far for me. So, but integrating, if we have excellent public transit, frequent bus service with bike racks on it, and train stations that have lots and lots of bicycle parking and bike rental services, you know, bike share services at your destination, it works out to be a beautiful, extremely resource efficient transportation system. And so that's why it's so important to think in terms of connectivity, the connection between your home and the walk or bike trip to the bus stop or the train station, and then the facilities and services that are at each bus or train station. So you can go, if in a well-developed transportation system, you would know that anywhere in the region, you could get on your bike, go to a bus or get to a bus stop or a train station, go to the next one and either carry your bike there on the bus or train or rent a bike at your destination, and it will take, and you're almost as fast and far cheaper and having far more fun than if you were to drive on that busy highway. What do you think?
Thank you. I share this vision, and I'm sure the person who asked the question is delighted to have so much material from you with that regard. Thank you, Todd. I'm afraid we have to switch to the third speakers, otherwise we will squeeze her out. Thank you, Todd. Have a look at the Q&A. There may be one question we didn't have the time to look at. Thank you. I will now introduce our third speaker. Kerstin Stark comes from the DLR Institute of Transport Research in Germany. She's a sociologist and political scientist. She has a PhD in urban planning from the University of Kassel. Her research focuses on mobility innovations using qualitative empirical social research and participatory approaches. Today, Kerstin is taking us to the fabulous world of shared app-based micromobility. She will tell us how German cities have coped or tried to cope with the sudden arrival of this new service. She sees great potential in micromobility to make a better transport system on the condition that it is integrated and regulated. So as mentioned earlier today by the ITF head of research, Mr. Perkins, my colleague Tatiana Samsonova is preparing a report on the regulation of shared micromobility to be released in June. So watch this space, and we're glad that today's conversation will be particularly useful to us in preparing this report. Kerstin, I understand that one of your colleagues will share the floor with you, Alexandre. She will contribute to the Q&A as well. But now is the time to share your screen. I see you've already done that. You have 15 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. And welcome to the talk on implementing micromobility services. I present here the work of the team of Alexandra König, Laura Gebhardt, Julia Schupan, and me. They are also in the audience, like you already said. So in our study, we looked at the introduction of micromobility, especially electric scooters, and we were interested in the perspective of the administrations and providers or operators. And there's a vibrant debate on the potentials of micromobility. It may contribute to sustainable transport by replacing car use for short distances, at least, of up to 4 kilometers. And my colleagues Gebhardt et al. Assessed a theoretical potential of 10 to 15%. But that is just the theoretical potential. If micromobility is to play a role in replacing car traffic, it needs to be accepted and also perceived as useful by potential user groups and the society as a whole. So what is the problem? When e-scooters were first introduced to some German cities, and I think it's the same for global cities, there was a lot of resentment due to improperly parked vehicles in public spaces, vandalism, and conflicts of land use affecting especially pedestrians and cyclists. And Germany could have known better with regard to international experience, though. In the US, several cities like San Francisco temporarily banned e-scooters after their initial introduction due to complaints from residents, and they were allowed again after regulations were put in place to govern their operation. So our assumption for the study is the way micromobility, such as electric scooters, is implemented in municipalities influences the acceptance and also their use. And up to date, there's not much research on this topic, so we try to address this gap. And against this background, our research question was and is, how can micromobile services be implemented in cities in such a way that they are accepted and their potential for sustainable transport can be exploited? By the term micromobility, we understand means of transportation that are used mainly to cover the first and last mile and in combination with other modes. And electric scooters are one form of micromobility. They are small, lightweight electric vehicles that offer the ride for one person and reach up to 25 kilometers per hour with motor support. So far for the definition. And the introduction of electric scooters was relatively late in Germany in 2019 compared to the US. They started in 2016. And in Germany, the introduction became possible after the release of the relevant German law, Personal Light Electric Vehicles Regulations, that is in fact since 2019. For our study, we used a qualitative design and conducted in-depth interviews with experts and stakeholders in the area of e-scooter sharing from 6 German cities: Berlin, Leipzig, Hanover, Brunswick, Wolfsburg, and Munich. And we selected the cities for their different levels of implementation of e-scooters. And we selected a total of 21 experts from 5 domains: e-scooter operators and other private transport companies, public transport companies, transport authorities and policymakers, and stakeholder associations, as well as planning offices and consulting companies. The interviews lasted for about 30 to 60 minutes and were recorded and then transcribed afterwards. And to analyze the interviews, we applied the qualitative content analysis. So the analysis came up with 3 key topics or key categories: market entry, responses to operators and attitudes, and regulation strategies. And I will now present our results with respect to these 3 categories. First, what did we learn about the market entry? Electric scooters were not available in all investigated cities, but all had received requests from transport companies. In some cases, e-scooter sharing operators were approached by interested cities, but mostly the initiative came from the e-scooter operators. Municipalities were partly even overwhelmed by the number of requests. Here a quote by an e-scooter operator. He said, their cities sometimes had 8 to 10 requests from e-scooter providers, and I think there's a lot of skepticism among the cities because they thought 10 providers with 1,000 e-scooters each is too much. A third aspect relates to the contact between city and the transport company, with which either took place or did not. So the launch of e-scooter sharing was partly preceded or accompanied by negotiations and consultations, but partly also not. Let's come to the second category: responses and attitudes. Roughly, we identified 3 main responses towards the requests from transport companies that were interested in entering the local market. So first, hesitation or even disapproval. Some interview partners expressed their skepticism towards the usefulness and also the business conduct of e-scooter companies. This may be illustrated with a quote by a public transport company: "I have not yet found a city that is not annoyed by the e-scooters." Another attitude was ignorance of the cities towards the requests from the transport companies. Some of them felt that some cities lacked the awareness that mobility service innovations could help to get a more sustainable transport system. And to illustrate this, here the quote of a transport company representative criticizing a lack of strategy and learning ability in some cities. "There's no concept and no strategy how to integrate new mobility offers. There are cities that think we don't really need anything except public transport and bicycles. And even though the city strategy hasn't caused a shift away from cars in the last 30 years, somehow that's not taken into account." However, we also found openness and interest in finding solutions. In some cities, the transport companies were invited for meetings along with further stakeholders, and the cities were interested in finding suitable solutions or compromises in line with the stakeholders' interests. For example, in the following case, we discuss together what the city wants, what we can fulfill, which are perhaps also demands that we cannot fulfill. And to the final category, we found 3 regulation strategies. The first one is non-involvement in the introduction of e-scooters. Some municipalities do not consider themselves as active or responsible part in the introduction of e-scooters. Their view is that transport companies can do whatever they want and cannot be prevented from entering the market as long as it is within the applicable laws. And unlike cities following the second strategy, the proactive involvement, some cities get involved and negotiate rules for the operation of e-scooters, for example, a pilot phase or so-called quality agreements. The next quote illustrates this process of negotiating the interests between city and transport company. The city wants to do a test phase first, where we said we would not do a test phase, but start with a smaller system, which is more controlled and will then adapt it gradually to the demand. And the third strategy we found is the protective regulation. Some cities impose officially or non-officially strict requirements for the introduction of e-scooters in order to protect existing mobility services or public transport strategies. Here the quote of a transport company representative complaining about the attitude of a city. The city has not yet seen an e-scooter here because the city administration wants you to use the existing public infrastructure of mobility hubs. The city doesn't want e-scooters to be parked in the whole city. Let's have a closer look at the legal situation and the quality agreements I mentioned. They are signed between city and operator, covering regulatory guidelines based on self-commitment. That is, they are not legally binding. At the moment, the cities in Germany are faced with legal uncertainties if and how to enforce rules for micromobility services. The existing federal regulations for e-scooters I mentioned in the beginning leave many issues open, such as rules for parking or distributing the e-scooters around the city. And at the moment, local equality agreements fill this gap to regulate important details. And from the operator's point of view, agreeing to a quality agreement makes also sense, although not legally binding, as they hope for a good relationship with the municipality. Before ending, we like to shed some light on the wishes and requirements that the stakeholders have for the ideal shape of e-scooter sharing. There's this, what we see here is the output of the software MaxQDA, and it represents the categories coded with it. There's a broad spectrum of objectives, but key concerns are intermodality or connectivity and multimodality. And linked to that, the integration of e-scooter sharing systems in a cross-modal mobility app. Also important are sustainability aspects regarding the life cycle of the vehicles. And in terms of business models and use cases, there's also the desire to integrate e-scooters in the public transport system in such a way that it complements existing services and modes rather than replacing them. And linked to that, e-scooters need to be regulated so that they do not increase the already existing competition for road space between cars and active modes. To conclude, potentials of micromobility require the integration in the public transport system, and they are yet to be exploited. There are differences regarding the commitment of municipalities in actively shaping the introduction of e-scooters. We identified 3 introduction styles based on the combination of the presented categories. The first one is protective, the protective style, the second proactive, and finally the laissez-faire introduction style. These styles are to be understood as rough possible ways of dealing with e-scooters at a certain point in time. In reality, there may be changes in the styles or overlaps over time. For example, in the beginning, Berlin could have been classified as the laissez-faire introduction style, but more recently, regulatory interventions have been made so that it now fits rather the proactive one. Let's have a closer look at the introduction styles. The protective one entails that e-scooters are rather tried to keep away from the local market. The response and attitudes are hesitating to disapproving, and the regulation strategy is rather strict. The proactive style is considering the introduction more carefully and engages consultations with interested transport companies. The general attitude is open. The regulation strategy consists of self-committed rules responding to the city's requirements. And the laissez-faire style is rather liberal and does not set entry hurdles for the respective companies. The reactions and attitudes are rather ignorant. That is not obstructive, but also not supportive. The regulation strategy is uninvolved. The city does not see itself as responsible for shaping business models. And would like to conclude that the proactive partnership might be the favorable way to shape micromobility services that are in line with the city's interests and at the same time deal with legal uncertainties. And our policy recommendations at the end, the potential of micromobility is yet to be exploited. We recommend a more balanced perspective on e-scooters as part of the solution, not only as a problem. The proactive involvement by the authorities is an essential prerequisite to exploit these potentials. And for that aim, municipalities should exchange experiences and set framework conditions to help clarify those uncertainties. And in general, there's need for more road space for active mobility, including micromobility. Conflicts could be avoided in the future if micromobility is given the space and the necessary infrastructure. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Kerstin, for presenting your research. We've got a first question in the Q&A from Nathanael Tan. What you have presented so far seems to be a city versus operator argument. What about views from the end users?
Well, yeah, in this study or in this part of the study, we did not ask the end users, or we did not consider the users themselves. But in another paper, we also were interested in the user perspective. But yeah, it shouldn't be city against operators. That's probably the important takeaway. We would prefer to have a more partnership relationship.
Thank you.
Or that's what we recommend, at least.
Because my understanding is that where a new service meets a market, isn't it the evidence that people were not fully satisfied with the existing transport system? If they are willing to pay for, say, e-scooters, that means they were not fully happy with the bike share system, with the public transport system, with bike theft and problems like that. And is there value in such services to put the finger on what the authorities could do better?
Well, certainly there is, and well, what we recommend, or what our point is here, is that micromobility or e-scooters are not bad or good. It's better to have a more rational perspective and see where, for example, bike sharing systems miss something. For example, the physical activity. Some people probably do not want to bike themselves, but I think e-scooters could be a good way for those user groups that don't like the physical activity but are still willing to not use a car.
Thank you. You said most of the rules set by the municipalities are non-binding. That is probably a handicap, but nevertheless, from what you've seen in German cities, is there some regulatory innovation that you've noticed and that you think the rest of the world could learn from?
No, I don't think at this point in time there's no regulatory setting. I think that that could be could influence the rest of the world. So, but maybe my colleagues have another opinion. And
Kerstin, I'm afraid we are going to be cut off because we have only 1 minute left, and I've got to close the session.
Okay.
I'm sorry for that. I see we have also a question on safety, but there's no time. I would recommend the person asking to consult the ITF report on safe micromobility. Thank you, Kerstin.
Thank you.
It is now time to conclude, time essentially to close the session. I'd like to thank very much the participants for joining us today, and especially for interacting with the speakers. Please also join me in thanking our speakers for sharing such relevant research. It's much appreciated. The ITF Research Day continues tomorrow with sessions dedicated to the recovery from the COVID-19 crisis. We will start at 1:30 p.m. Paris time with a keynote from Matthew Baldwin, Deputy Director General for Mobility at the European Commission. So I really hope to see you there. Bye for now.